Thanks for joining our event. My name is Ethan. I'm a student at Northwestern University. I'm also a volunteer at the Asian Culture and Education Society USA. So our next speaker is Hannah. She has 14 years of experience in the healthcare industry. She has worked for the oldest public health institution in the country, as well as the leading advocacy organization for physicians in America. She holds degrees from the University of Cincinnati and The Ohio State University, and most recently completed her MBA from University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. She not only has government expertise, but also practical experience in data-driven decision-making and performance results. She is a thoughtful leader that believes in abundant possibilities and thrives on maximizing any team that she is a part of. She also served as a national president of Delta Phi Lambda sorority and chair of the National APIDA Pan-Hellenic Association. Currently, she is a board of trustee member of the Circle of Sisterhood Foundation. Thank you very much.
Aloha friends, my name is Hannah Saw. Sorry I could not be there in person or in live format to answer questions from you all, but I've been asked to talk to you a little bit about my professional journey and share how I ended up where I am today. So currently I serve as the Vice President of Performance and Operations for the American Medical Association. During my career, I always knew that I wanted to be in the healthcare field. When I was younger, I actually wanted to be a doctor, which some of you may also aspire to be. Throughout high school and up until college, I actually had dual admission. When I got to college, though, I realized that maybe medicine is not exactly what I want to do. And this was mainly due to the fact that my interactions growing up with my pediatrician were very positive. And what I remembered was, I remembered very fondly going to the doctor, talking to him, sharing my concerns, and really having a relationship. My experience as I got older, though, changed. And a lot of this is a function of capitalism and the way reimbursements work for insurance companies that really require doctors to spend less and less time with their patients. So you may also experience this too. You spend a lot of time in the waiting room, and then you spend about 5 minutes, maybe even less, talking to the doctor about your condition. And I realized this is not how I want to practice medicine. So I decided to switch gears. At the time, the most classes I had taken were math classes, so I decided to switch my major to math. I thought at one point that I would be an actuary, still in the healthcare realm. And for those of you who don't know what actuaries do, they are super whizzes with numbers, Excel, and math. I actually did an internship at an insurance company. And that is actually how I realized that I also did not want to be an actuary. Because you see, part of the reason why I wanted to be a doctor is because I wanted to interact with people, to help them, to teach them. And an actuary spends most of their time behind a computer, working on spreadsheets independently. So once I graduated from college, I decided to try and go back to a healthcare field and decided to go to acupuncture school. I went to 2 different acupuncture schools in Florida and Minnesota, but also realized that acupuncture at that time was not widely accepted. It was not even accepted by most insurance companies, aside from California and New York. Acupuncture as a field, although it has existed for thousands of years in Asia, was not really a well-respected profession here. So I thought and knew that I would experience challenges trying to make a living in that field. So at the time, I decided to then switch again to public health. And I went to the Ohio State University for my master's in public health and epidemiology and my master of science in biostatistics. Why 2 master's degrees, you ask? At the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into public service, in which a master's of public health is more prevalent, or if I wanted to go into pharmaceuticals, in which case the biostatistics degree would be more helpful in terms of getting in the door. Between my first and second year in grad school, I did a practicum at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Not only fell in love with the city of New York, but also just was really, really fascinated with the New York City Department of Health, as it is the oldest public health institution in the US, the most well-respected, and the most cutting edge in terms of policies and programs that it conducts. So luckily, I was hired after grad school at the Department of Health, which is where I spent most of my career. I started, because of my degrees, I started as an analyst in the East Harlem District Public Health Office. At the time, there were several neighborhoods within New York City where the health disparities were great. And as you can guess, they were mostly inhabited by Black and brown folks and Asian folks, people of color. So I did asthma research, worked with schools to make sure children had all the medications, knew their asthma action plans to try and reduce the rates of asthma. From there, I realized that I didn't want to just be an analyst. I wanted to get more involved in the programmatic side and interact more with clientele. So I transferred to the Bureau of Tobacco Control, where I became a tobacco cessation counselor. So I counseled city workers on how to quit smoking, counseled over 100 people successfully to quit smoking, and also was in charge of the largest nicotine patch and gum giveaway in the city of New York. So every spring, for a period of 16 days, New Yorkers could call, fill out a short survey, and receive free patches and gum from the city. And I managed that program from start to finish. We gave away over 40,000 kits in a span of 16 days every year. And then from there, I decided to get even more involved in the programmatic side, and really promote my name and do some publications. So from the Bureau of Tobacco Control, I transferred to the Bureau of Injury Prevention and worked on a gun violence prevention program. This was probably programmatically my favorite program to work for. We worked in 6 different neighborhoods across New York, worked with formerly incarcerated, former gang members, and I trained them on how to input data, the importance of data collection and numbers, and how to track their mediations as they were breaking up fights and literally preventing violent acts from happening. I did some evaluation and some presentations on that, but also realized that I wanted more. I wanted more in terms of recognition, responsibility, and salary. And so that meant that I had to work my way up into management. So within about a year and a half after working with the Cure Violence program and setting up their entire evaluation portfolio, I then transferred to the Bureau of Environmental Surveillance. And there I became the special assistant to the assistant commissioner, which is a pretty prestigious role. I was basically his right hand, attended meetings with him, took notes, managed the budget with all of his directors. And this is when I started to realize the ins and outs of management, what kinds of things are important to them, what decisions they're facing on a daily basis, and was really my first foray into a very high-level management role. From there, I then transferred to the Center for Health Equity. And this is really when my passion and my work role really started to align. Because as a Korean American growing up in the US, I've struggled with my identity early on in my life. All throughout high school, I wasn't sure where I kind of fit in. There were times when I felt I was not Korean enough when hanging out with just Korean folks. And then when hanging out with people at school, which were mostly white, I was never American enough or white enough for them. Being in the sorority kind of helped me solidify my identity, learning more about Asian history and Asian culture, Vincent Chin, Angel Island, which is the Western analog to Ellis Island, but has a much more sinister history. If you haven't heard of it, please look it up and do some research on it. Supreme Court cases around discrimination, like Fred Korematsu versus the US. All these things that I had never learned in school about the history of my people really helped me to understand and be able to better position myself as I went on in my career. So being able to work in the Center for Health Equity really excited me, because now I could not only help in terms of, Asian populations, highlighting disparities that are not just about Black and Brown people, but also Asian people. But I was also high enough in a role where I could also be part of the decision-making process and really use my voice to advocate for our populations. So I became the director of planning, became acting assistant commissioner, and ultimately senior director to the deputy commissioner. So really was able to understand management roles and how decisions are made, and really advocate, find my voice, and really, I credit New York City for really having me grow up and really find myself in terms of my career and the professional that I am today. And my deputy commissioner at the time received a job offer from the American Medical Association, and shortly after I joined her at the American Medical Association. Again, working in the Center for Health Equity, now as a vice president, overseeing our entire budget, contracting, hiring, communications, internal training, performance management, goal setting, short and medium term planning, and partnership engagement for the center on a national scale. So not only do I credit the New York City Department of Health for how I show up as a professional, but also my volunteer work. So I mentioned before that I struggle with my identity, and in college, I was lucky enough to finally really understand who I was, because I found a group of women who also felt how I did. And we started a chapter of an Asian interest sorority. At the time, I didn't even know Asian fraternities and sororities existed. I was actually on my way to an informational for a Black sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho, when I saw a flyer for women gathering interest for women who wanted to start an Asian interest sorority. And I'm a firm believer also that serendipity is kind of the universe guiding you to where you should go. I went to that informational and ended up starting a chapter of Delta Phi Lambda Sorority Incorporated at the University of Cincinnati. I was a charter member for that class. And really, the sorority also accelerated not only my understanding of who I was and pride in my heritage, but also my leadership skills, because I became chapter president while I was an undergrad. Immediately after graduation, I joined the national board of the sorority and would later become president of Delta Phi Lambda for 7 years. During my tenure, I started a 501c3 foundation, the Delta Phi Lambda Foundation, which now has a scholarship in my name, and became chair of the National APIDA, Asian Pacific Islander Desi American Pan-Hellenic Association, which is a coalition of all Asian interest, not all, but many Asian interest fraternities and sororities, known as NAPA. Through those experiences, I was able to really get a seat at some very large tables of decision makers and powerhouses, other fraternities and sororities that have been established for hundreds of years versus decades, like our sorority was, really allowed me the opportunity to be a big dog and play with the big dogs, so to speak. And because our organization was so young and less established, it was all volunteer run, where all the organizations had paid staff. So I had to really figure out how to work with folks, how to motivate them, because they were not being paid for their role within the sorority work and management. But I, as a leader, had to figure out how to get them to listen and run a national organization as large as Delta Phi Lambda. So while my journey did not end up how I thought it would in being a doctor, I actually am still pretty close to the healthcare field, doing something that I love, that I'm passionate about, that I'm good at. And I just want to share that no matter where your life journey takes you, pay attention to those signs, pay attention to your gut. Make sure that every opportunity you use it as a learning moment, because there's always a lesson to be learned, not only from your experience, but also the people around you. So don't take any of that opportunity for granted. You may not see it now, why your path is taking you down the road that it is, but eventually it will all make sense, like it has for me and my journey. And I'm very grateful for the doors that have been opened to me by other people. And I continue to try and open doors for others by sharing my experience, sharing my knowledge, and passing it on to future generations. So pay it forward. Continue to do research, never stop learning, and follow your heart, and everything will all work out in the end, as it should. So thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.